you know, genocide, not denialism, but like worse, supporting genocide kind of. I'm sure Wendover didn't intend to mean it like that, but it does seem a lot like, the same American Manifest Destiny, pro fucking genocide attitude.
Civilization. As the years rolled forward, cascading sequences of gold rushes and increasing need for agricultural output pulled Australian society further from the convenient natural harbors where it began. With man and beast continuously working to reclaim the land they usurped, the increasingly small and informal groups of settlers on the frontier relied on their more advanced weaponry to maintain their foothold. Guns matured into a standard-issue piece of kit for those straying beyond the established towns. A century on, that reality remained. 20th century Australians continued to leave the comfortable confines of coastal cities in hope of transforming rural land into a living. Those that found themselves in this less urban life, in turn, inherited a unique culture and identity framed around individualism and rugged self-reliance. These individuals were proud of their lifestyle, providing for their families and nation through what they helped pull from the earth. Yet, even as technology advanced, nature proved unruly, and so rural Australians continued to rely on their weaponry to defend their crops or livestock or minerals from the other. Among this population, guns had become conflated with culture. They were important tools, they were pest control, they were family...
I mean, it's great. He is making a comparison to America, one that I make so regularly, and talking about how dumb fuck Americans and dumb fuck Australians come from the same fucking penal colony attitude, genocidal penal colony attitude, only to, I assume, show that a better tomorrow is possible for the dumb fuck Americans, kind of like the dumb fuck Australians did.
Heirlooms, they were security. But as urban Australia continued to develop alongside rural Australia, guns in cities and suburbs began to seem superfluous. Tools no longer worth the inherent risk of operating, and in untrained or uncertain hands, potential disasters. All the while, as this rift widened, the weapons grew more effective. The destructive potential of a minute shrunk down to a second. What was once but a cultural difference morphed into an issue. Should personal gun ownership be allowed? Was the necessity of some stronger than the risk to most, as the potential for misuse grew in step with technological development? As the century progressed, as the cosmopolitan and countryside continued to drift apart, the issue escalated, and the questions informing the issue begged for an answer. Australia's gun debate, informed by history, landscape, and legacy, intensified by growing urban-rural divide and the technology's ruthless efficiency, was at an impasse. As one exasperated New South Wales politician voiced after a futile national gun summit in 1987, quote, "It will take a massacre in Tasmania before we get gun reform in Australia." Nearly a decade later, his words proved prophetic. It was just after 1 in the afternoon on the 28th of April, 1996, when a 28-year-old man in a yellow Volvo entered the Port Arthur historic site. Carrying what security described as a sports-type bag through the tourist-laden formal penal colony, the man entered a busy cafe, ate a meal, then opened fire on unsuspecting tourists. Within just 90 seconds, the gunman had killed 20 people with 29 bullets. Leaving the cafe, the shooting then continued onto the streets. By the time of his capture the following day, the gunman had killed 35 and injured another 23. In the hands of the murderer throughout his rampage was a semi-automatic Colt AR-15, a weapon that, under Tasmania's uniquely hands-off gun laws, was available for purchase without a license. All told, it was the worst mass shooting in the nation's history, and while perpetrated in a far corner of the country, the sheer depravity rocked Australia to its core.
That's crazy. Does that sound familiar? Now, I'm sure they fucking turned around and said, "Mate, what we really need is to make sure all tourists have a fucking AR-15 too, so they can fire back." What they needed was a fucking good guy, a good fucking bloke with a gun, right? That's what they fucking needed. And then another mass shooting happened next week, and they were like, "Well, what we fucking need is more God and more fucking, thoughts and fucking prayers, mate. Why are you making this fucking political? That's what the Bogans said. And then another week happened where there's another mass shooting and another mass shooting and another mass shooting and another mass shooting. And then there was like 2 mass shootings a day, ultimately coming to 2 mass shootings a day where they were saying like, we need to fucking militarize the police further. And we need to make sure that we don't fucking hurt the Bobby's fucking feelings. That's the reason why they're not doing a good job, you sick cunts. And then more mass shootings kept happening. And at a point where, Australia had more guns than it had people. And the most popular gun was the one that they just showed, right? And then finally they arrived at fucking door control, mate. That's what we fucking need to do. We need to do door control, mate. And that's where they're at now, right? Like that's what's going on. Don't say Bobby used coppers. Oh, Bobby is British. Sorry, coppers. Fucking copper dogs. We need to make sure that shrimps are on the fucking Barbie and AR-15s are in the hands of every fucking baby. That's right. We need a fucking VB long neck and an AR-15 to defend ourselves against the fucking emus. And then, yeah, politicians would go up and say, politicians would go on television and say, like, you know, we need fucking AR-15s to shoot against the fucking untamed emus. It's just a mental health problem, mate. Prawns on the fucking Barbie. It's prawns, not shrimps. Okay.
For a moment, the shocked nation stammered. Then it began to move. While the Port Arthur shooting was Australia's largest, it was far from the country's first. The Hoddle Street killings and the Queen Street massacre, just months apart in Melbourne in 1987, had set the backdrop for that year's ultimately fruitless National Gun Summit. The gun violence continued into the new decade too, with 1 or more shootings in 1990, 91, 92, and 93. In 10 years, Australia experienced 12 mass shootings, abruptly ending the lives of 98 people.
That's wild, bro. 10 or 12? 12 is like 12 mass shootings is less mass shootings that happen over the course of Memorial Day weekend. 98 is less deaths in mass shootings than the number of people that died, 187, over the course of Memorial Day weekend. That's a 3-day weekend in America where we doubled the number of fucking murders that occurred, gun murders that occurred. That's wild.
While gun ownership was common across the nation's history, the increase in mass shootings and the high firearm death rate of 2.84 per 100,000 people, well above England's rate of 0.42 per 100,000, were becoming
These fucking pussies at 10 mass shootings over the course, or 12 mass shootings over the course of 10 years, and we're like, we need to do something about this, mate. These sick cunts, these proper cunts, these shit cunts, they're getting their fucking hands on AR-15s and they're shooting up motherfuckers. And meanwhile in America, that's like literally, that's not even a thing. That's like weekend numbers, okay? Long weekend numbers.
Too much for most Australians to bear. By 1996, punctuated by the most horrific shooting of them all.
Chat laughing at the lack of mass shootings, fucking psychos. What should we do? If you're an American, what can you do but laugh? You can't fucking solve it, okay? So yeah, of course we're gonna laugh. We're gonna look at a country that, you know, actually did the right thing, and we're gonna laugh about it because we're broken.
All Australians had had enough. In a poll run days after the Port Arthur massacre, 90% of the 2,058 respondents supported a national ban on automatic and semi-automatic firearms, and 88% supported registration requirements for all firearms. Simply put, average, everyday Australians were ready for change.
I don't understand. Did they arm the teachers like we just did in Ohio? Or Florida in the aftermath of Parkland? They must have, right? That's what countries normally are supposed to do, right? Like a mass shooting happens and you're like, oh, the problem is not enough people had the guns. That's what the problem was, actually.
But popular public attitudes won't move policy alone. A fundamental restructuring of Australian gun laws was anything but a foregone conclusion in the wake of Port Arthur. Any attempt at sweeping change would have to navigate around the country's powerful gun lobby, a vocal and impassioned minority of rural Australians wary of government overreach, and the fact that gun policy was governed not by the federal government, but
Wait, is this actually the N-word, like, for real? Does Australia actually just straight up have, like, an entire part of... Why is that a thing? They replaced them in 2020 or so? Wait, what? What the fuck? Bro, what the fuck, dude? Oh, god damn it, dude. Australia, dude. I mean, remember when we learned about the White Australia policy? Not that surprising when you think about it.
by states. And yet, the day after the shooting, John Howard, Australia's Prime Minister for all of 48 days, announced his effort to push through major gun law reform. Howard and his coalition government had ample room to cop out, to throw their hands up and say it was a state-level issue. Instead, they pushed on. As he later reflected, quote, "You never let a good crisis go to waste. Tragic though the event was, it gave us an opportunity to do something in the wake of it so that those lives were not lost in vain." In the days that followed, cabinet meetings poured over studies pulled together by non-governmental groups like the Coalition for Gun Control and previously internally produced policy recommendations that followed the Melbourne shootings. Outside of cabinet meetings, Howard urged representatives from his coalition of Liberal and National Party members to stand with him. But as Howard applied pressure on conservatives representing rural Australia, so too did the nation's gun lobby, which organized marches, street demonstrations, and speeches. Ultimately, the lobby's mobilization proved detrimental to its own cause, as arguments made in media that 99.9% of gun owners abide by the law, for example, gave way to high-profile figures like the vice president of the Firearm Owners Association threatening bloodshed if stricter regulations went through. In less than a week after the Port Arthur massacre, the political determination emanating from Parliament had resulted in a cabinet agreement on a prohibition on automatic rifles, semi-automatic rifles, and pump-action shotguns.
Wow, that's crazy that they did that. That's crazy that the fucking gun rights guys, the gun nuts in Australia also threatened with bloodshed. And then the Australian government basically was like, with what guns, mate? We're taking them away. We're fucking taking them away from you, you dumb cunt.
The creation of a national firearm registration system and a compensation fund for a gun buyback program. 4 days later, on May 10th, the Prime Minister hosted the police ministers from all states and territories to present the 10-point plan that soon informed the nation's first set of universal gun laws, what would be known as the National Firearms Agreement. Even with broad public support, the NFA was hard won. Queensland, the Northern Territory, and Western Australia refused to agree to the NFA for months and pushed for semi-automatics to remain legal as long as they were crimped or modified to carry limited rounds. Only after Howard threatened to expand federal power did they join the nationwide program. In some places, the NFA was bitterly resented. During speaking tours intended to explain and promote the program, Deputy Prime Minister Tim Fischer was burned in effigy in the Queensland state of Gympie, while Prime Minister Howard donned a bulletproof vest when speaking in Sale, Victoria. With all states and territories signed on by the middle of 1996, the agreement flipped Australia's loose, decentralized gun laws on their head. What was once a system so scant that a law student reading